Hi, I'm Graham from Greenfoot. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an antiviral extract using a couple of medicinal mushrooms that grow wild throughout the Northern Hemisphere. And I'm going to tell you up front, this extract works astonishingly well. I tested against the flu, the stomach flu, the common cold, and more recently, I had an opportunity to test it with the coronavirus. I was shocked at how effective it was. Day and a half, and you were recovered. Done. 40 minutes after each dose, you could feel yourself getting better. It was that obvious. And since you're probably dying to know, I'll tell you right now, the two mushrooms are the birch polypore and the horsehoof polypore. But before I go any further, I need to make it perfectly clear that it's against the law to make health claims for a product unless it has had rigorous, standardized testing, which can be verified by a third party. I haven't done any of that, and I'm not going to. And that's because it costs millions of dollars, and I don't have millions of dollars. And so that's also why, as effective as it is, this extract is not one that I'll be able to sell. At least not after making this video. I'd be crucified. And don't expect anything from Big Pharma either, because they don't do this kind of research, because they can't protect their investment with intellectual property rights. And that's because there really isn't anything to protect. You're just taking these mushrooms, simmering them in hot water, and drinking a tea, that's it. The point of this video is to share what I've learned about how to use these mushrooms so that you can make it and see for yourself how amazing it really is. And one last thing, although I'm not selling this extract, I do harvest and sell chaga mushroom extract, and you can learn more about that by visiting my website, Greenfoot.ca. In this section, I'll be showing how to identify these mushrooms. However, since there's plenty of online resources available for that already, I'm going to be brief. As I've already mentioned, the two mushrooms are the birch polypore and the horsehoof polypore. Interesting fact, these are the two mushrooms found on Ötzi the Iceman. I like to call it the Ötzi extract. The birch polypore's Latin name is Fomitopsis betulina. It's found exclusively on birch trees. And when you first see it, you'll wonder if it's edible because it's kind of soft and pliable, but it's actually tough as leather. The Latin name for the horsehoof polypore is Fomes fomentarius. It's found on a variety of deciduous trees, though it's most commonly found on birch trees. As a matter of fact, you'll often find horsehoof growing together with the birch polypore on the same tree. Usually, the horsehoof will be occupying the bottom part of the tree, while the birch polypore will be way up on top out of reach. To get them down, I would use a stick to poke at them until they fall off. Statistically, for every pound of birch polypore I harvest, I can usually harvest about a pound of horsehoof as well. If I was out all day harvesting, I would be filling my pack slowly with mostly horsehoof, and near the end of the day, I might find the mother lode of the birch polypore all at once. But on average, if I harvest long enough, I end up with about the same amount of each. So that's the ratio that I used in the extract. It's practical, and they both have strong antiviral properties. There are quite a few lab studies on the birch polypore, not so many for the horsehoof polypore, and there are no human studies for either of them that I could find, but I'll list a few of the studies that I did find which were useful in the description. You'll often hear the popular mycologist Paul Stamets talk about using these mushrooms to save our honeybees from colony collapse disorder. Giving these extracts to bees caused a huge drop in their viral loads and greatly improved their survival. After learning about their amazing properties, it seemed odd to me that we didn't have any human studies. But as I've already mentioned, there isn't any incentive to invest in that kind of research. So I did my own. Figuring out the correct dosing was the key to unlocking this extract potential. Once I had that figured out, it became a very powerful medicine. But trying to figure that out was absolutely ridiculous. It required a lot of luck and some reckless stupidity. Because think about it. If you're doing experiments with some crazy new medicine and it's not working, it's really hard to know what you're doing wrong, especially if you're not even sure that you are doing anything wrong. Maybe it just doesn't work. When do you just throw in the towel and give up. If you have lots of money and lots of resources, then you can just try everything, take lots of notes, and eventually you figure it out. But I didn't have that luxury, so I had to find another way. And after nearly 3 years of experimenting, the only way I could figure it out was to test it on myself with something nasty. In December of 2019, there was an unusually potent strain of influenza A circulating in the region. If you caught it, then you were sick in bed for a week with high fevers, chills, headaches, congestion. This was a nasty flu. So, I can't say that I deliberately infected myself, but I didn't actually try too hard to avoid catching it either. And when I did start getting sick, it came on hard and fast, and within 24 hours, I was in really rough shape. The worst part was this unrelenting headache that just kept getting worse and worse, and it wouldn't let me sleep. And not being able to sleep when you're sick is really bad, because being tired is what will make you get even more sick. So I took a mega dose of this extract, and I can't even remember how much, I just remember it was lots. And I noticed, after 40 minutes, the headache started to ease off just enough that I could finally get some sleep. But this remission didn't last. And after 3.5 hours, I could feel the symptoms start to come back. So I took another mega dose. And wouldn't you know it, the same thing happened again. 40 minutes, the headache started to fade. And like clockwork, 3.5 hours later, I could feel it coming back again. Eventually, I figured out that a 1200 milligram dose worked best. And I just kept taking a new dose every 3.5 to 4 hours. And with each dose, I could feel myself getting incrementally better. Until after the 6th dose, like a day and a half, I was over the flu and ready to get back to living my life again. Seriously, a day and a half. Everyone else around me was like sick for a week. Yeah, I was feeling smug. Following that, I examined its efficacy 5 more times in different individuals. And in each case, the individual reported the same pattern of relief. They would start with a 1200 milligram dose. 40 minutes later, there was some relief. 3.5 hours to 4 hours later, the symptoms would start coming back. This would usually cue them into taking another dose. After 6 to 8 doses, the individual reported feeling recovered, but they would continue taking maintenance doses, usually 200 to 400 milligrams, at various intervals for several more days. If the individual stopped taking the extract too soon, then the symptoms would return. Improvement was so noticeable that the subjects reported that it was easy for them to find their own optimum dose. The key was that you needed to know what to look for, because there's definitely a pattern, but it's subtle. It doesn't feel like your typical over-the-counter cold remedy where you can definitely feel you've been drugged, but what the heck, at least you're not in pain anymore. With this extract, it just feels like everything has naturally gotten less worse. And incrementally, dose after dose, you feel progressively better until you're just over it and you can start living your life again. If you didn't know what was going on, it would be easy to convince yourself that nothing was happening at all. I mean, really, who's going to notice that they're 1/8 less sick? You'd have to be so sick that you were literally sitting on the border between being glad you were alive and just wishing you were dead. But understanding that it works on a 4-hour cycle makes it all so obvious, because you can see the pattern of incremental improvement repeat itself over and over again. And the earlier you started taking the extract, the sooner you'd feel recovered. But mostly, people felt they were over their cold or flu by the end of the second day of taking the extract. After that, I wanted to conduct something that would loosely approach a controlled study with one group of people taking the extract and another group acting as a control. And then it just happened that in February of 2020, a few days before the lockdown started, there was a young child's birthday party that had caused an outbreak of the stomach flu. Note that most outbreaks of the stomach flu are not actually caused by the flu, and this particular outbreak was likely caused by the norovirus. In 2 of the households that I could monitor where no one was taking the extract, almost everyone got sick. In the 3rd household where everyone was taking the extract, no one got sick. So to summarize, in the first 2 households, a total of 8 out of 9 people became sick with nausea. 6 of the 9 had experienced vomiting, and 8 of the 9 had experienced diarrhea. In the 3rd household, where everyone was taking the extract, there were 3 people and no one became sick. However, they did all experience the slight onset of nausea before immediately taking the extract preventatively. It's worth noting that one of these individuals was actually a 77-year-old senior. I was able to observe this scenario play itself out 2 more times in September of 2020 when school started and there were a couple of colds going around. This was especially encouraging because many cases of the common cold are caused by coronaviruses the same as COVID-19. Then, in December of 2020, a husband and wife needed to quarantine when the wife contracted COVID at work. She began taking the extract after her 2nd day of having symptoms and continued to improve until by the 2nd day she felt recovered. At least, that's what was reported to me. Interestingly, the husband, who was self-isolating with the wife in their apartment together for 14 days, never tested positive. He had gone twice for tests, and both times the results had come back negative. He was taking a preventative dose of 200 milligrams every 4 hours. Now, I understand that none of this is conclusive, but it sure is compelling. I personally believe that it's effective against COVID-19, but honestly, I can't say for sure. However, I am completely satisfied that it works against a number of other viruses, including the flu. But regardless, you shouldn't trust anything I have to say anyways, because none of my testing followed the rigorous standards needed to make those kind of claims. In any case, I still plan on getting the vaccine, but I'm also going to have a bottle of this stuff handy as a backup just in case some strange new variant comes around. So how am I making this extract? Well, it's actually very simple. You just simmer these mushrooms in water and make a tea, that's it. And if that's all you feel comfortable doing, then really you should go for it because it's probably going to be good enough. But if you want to make a really good extract, there's a few more things you can do, and I'll go over that with you right now. Typically, I would use equal amounts of each mushroom. So for example, 1 pound of horsehoof for every 1 pound of birch polypore. I chose this ratio because it was usually how much of each mushroom I would find when I was out harvesting. Honestly though, the actual ratio didn't seem to matter very much. Both mushrooms have rather similar properties. The birch polypore is fairly easy to slice when it's still fresh, but once it's dried, it's very hard. In any case, you probably won't be able to chop the horsehoof at all. It's even harder, like wood. If you aren't making extract out of them right away, then you'll need to either store them in the freezer or dehydrate them. If you leave newly harvested mushrooms in your pack overnight, there's a good chance they'll start to get moldy by morning. And if you just let them air dry, as opposed to using an actual dehydrator that applies some heat, then they won't get quite dry enough and there's a good chance they'll look like sawdust after a few months because insects will start eating them up. It's really irritating to lose good mushrooms, so consider yourself warned. If you only have a few mushrooms, then you can just brew the horsehoof with the birch polypore all together in the same pot. If you have lots, then it's better to brew them up separately. This is because the horsehoof will take longer to extract than the birch polypore. This is mainly because of the difference in the sizes of the pieces. Theoretically, if you could grind everything down into a powder, then you'd only need to let them steep about 2 hours. If you have larger pieces, that's okay. You can still get all the medicine, but then you need to let them steep longer. Quick note, I actually tested this using different sized pieces of mushroom, and there really was no difference in the amount of medicine you get, so long as you let it steep long enough. So for birch polypore that's been sliced, 12 hours is good. But for horsehoof, you're going to need a good 24 hours for each steeping, maybe even a little bit longer. If you steep them enough times, you'll get a maximum yield of about 15% for the birch polypore and about 8% for the horsehoof polypore. So the birch polypore will give you about twice as much extract. When making a mushroom extract, you need to be aware that the tail end of the extraction process will pull out different compounds than the head. And in some cases, these compounds have been found to be quite important. So even though it'll feel like you're doing a lot more work for a lot less, it's possible that this could be the best part of the extract. What you're doing when you continue extracting after it feels like it's all spent is pulling out compounds that are just barely water soluble. So yeah, it takes a lot of work to get them out, but don't cheat yourself. Do the work. It's worth it. These important yet marginally soluble compounds is also why you should never filter your extract. Filtering it can cause some of them to be lost in the filter as a precipitate. This is very likely the case with the birch polypore, and it's definitely the case with other medicinal mushrooms, especially chaga mushroom. And this isn't just video talk. I've actually seen this tested in the lab with chaga mushroom. It really makes a huge difference. After it's all been brewed, you'll want to combine all your batches and simmer it down into a concentrate. Ideally, you want a 4% solution. In other words, 100 milliliters of extract would contain 4 grams of solids. This means that if the liquid was all evaporated away, there would be 4 grams of extract solids left behind. With a 4% solution, 2 tablespoons of extract will provide a 1200 milligram dose, 800 milligrams of birch polypore and 400 milligrams of horsehoof polypore, assuming you made your extract with equal amounts of each mushroom. If you started with a different ratio of mushrooms, then your end product will be different, but you should still work off of a 4% solution so that 2 tablespoons will still measure out a 1200 milligram dose. Since both mushrooms tend to have similar antiviral properties, it won't have a catastrophic effect on the final extract's effectiveness. I'm sure it'll be different, but I haven't been able to determine what that difference would be. So just go for it, and if you find something interesting, then please, by all means, let me know and say something in the comments. So how do you know if you have a 4% solution? Well, briefly, what you need to do is take a sample of the extract as a liquid and weigh it. Then completely dehydrate it and weigh it again. Then divide your dry weight by your wet weight, and that'll be the concentration. So I don't know. If that feels too confusing and you just want to keep things simple, then just do this. Start with 1 pound of each mushroom dry. And make sure they're completely dry, because if they're not completely dry, then your weights will be wrong. And if your weights are wrong, then everything else will be wrong. And then that means that your dosing will be wrong when you're measuring it out. And it's kind of nice to get your dosing right. So make sure your mushrooms are really, really dry. And you'll want 1 pound of each, so 2 pounds of mushrooms total. Put it all in a pot of water and simmer it for 24 hours. Then strain out the water and set it aside. Then add more water to the pot and simmer for another 24 hours. And repeat that 4 times. Combine all the batches together and simmer it all down until you've got 10 cups of extract total. That's about 2.5 liters. That will give you a 4% extract solution. I'm sure some of you will ask, what about using other solvents like alcohol? And to that I say, it depends on the mushroom and what properties you want in the final extract. Also, if we use alcohol, then your final extract will have alcohol. You'd end up taking a shot of vodka with your medicine. Probably not a good idea. The only way to eliminate the alcohol would be to completely dehydrate it. And this particular extract doesn't actually dehydrate very well. Now, if you built yourself a Greenfoot extractor, you could very easily do an alcohol extraction phase at the very end as a final step. But it works well as a straight water extract, so why complicate the process? And this way there isn't any alcohol in your final medicine either. Thank you for watching my video. I don't plan on making a lot of them, but if you found it useful, you won't want to miss the other ones I plan to make. So please subscribe. And consider buying Greenfoot chaga extract from one of my partnering chaga harvesters. Thank you.